Hello, Pastor Mark here from the Word of Life Fellowship Church in Omaha, Nebraska, again on a Wednesday. I have a quick thought for you today. We're going to read a passage from the Bible, so you could call it a Bible study, but mostly I want to talk to you about the concept of just slowing down and listening. Sometimes it's hard in the daily life that we live in, the grind of the modern world, to just stop and listen and stay there until you actually hear something. I'm specifically referring to hearing from the Lord. Now, in the Old Testament, in 1 Kings chapter 19, reading from my Bible app on my phone, we find the Lord speaking to Elijah. And Elijah was looking for the Lord to speak to him. He was listening for him. He was trying to hear from God. We know that. And then the Lord actually talks to him and tells him to do something here in verse 11. 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 11. I'm reading from the New King James Version today. Then he said, this is the Lord speaking, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord." Now, Elijah is in a cave, just to give you some context here. He's hiding out in a cave. So the king, the queen actually, has sent some people after him to kill him. And he's hiding out. And the Lord says, "Go out." So get out of the cave, go stand out on the, it's a cave on a mountain, so stand out here. And behold, the Lord passed by. So Elijah's there, and the Spirit and the presence of the Lord passes by. He senses the Lord's presence. And a great and strong wind tore into the mountains and broke the rocks in pieces before the Lord. So Elijah heard the Lord say, "Go out here, stand over here." And now the Spirit of the Lord is moving, and he sees the wind, the evidence of this wind, and the rocks are tumbling, and there's all kinds of stuff. But the Lord isn't speaking in the wind. Now, there are times in the Old Testament where the Lord did speak through the wind. One of those times was in Job, and the words used there is a whirlwind. We would call that a tornado in today's language, today's English verbiage. So there was this massive tornado, a cyclone of wind, if you please, and Job heard the Lord speak out of the tornado. Elijah's looking for the Lord to say something, because he's seeing the wind and the rocks are tumbling, and there's this massive demonstration that the Lord is present. And he didn't say anything there. And then an earthquake came, and there's a shaking going on, and he's expecting to hear the Lord in the shaking, because sometimes the Lord has spoken in times where it was quaking. Think of when Moses and the children of Israel were standing before Mount Sinai, when the Lord is literally introducing himself to the nation of Israel after they'd come out of Egypt. And he says, "I am the Lord your God, which brought you out of the land of Egypt." And while he's speaking, the mountain is on fire and shaking, and the whole place is shaking. Yeah, God can speak any way he wants to. The people in that context, in that place, they were terrified. Well, Elijah, he's listening. Okay, we got an earthquake going on here. We just had this wind. I know the Lord is present. I feel his presence. And he's about to say something, but he did not speak during the earthquake or in the earthquake. And then there was a fire. Well, I just mentioned the time Moses, now also Moses standing before the burning bush that was not consumed. There's a fire, and God speaks to Moses out of the fire. Elijah's waiting for the Lord to speak through the fire, but he didn't. Some people, I've heard different ministries and ministers say this. God doesn't speak through the fire. God doesn't speak in the wind. God doesn't speak in the earthquake. Well, I just gave you a few examples where he does and did. And if he did it then, he can do it now. Jesus Christ the same yesterday, today, and forever. So I'm not going to say God will not speak through a wind, a fire, an earthquake. I'm not going to say that because he has in the past. But I think for what we want to talk about today is the still small voice. We would call that a whisper. Verse 13 in this chapter 19 of 1 Kings. So it was when Elijah heard it, the still small voice. He wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood in the entrance of the cave. Suddenly a voice came to him. Now, it doesn't say we're whispering again. And what are you doing here, Elijah? And then from here on, what he said to Elijah is not what we're talking about today. It's important. It's significant in the biblical historical text. But I want to talk to you about stopping and listening until you can hear. Sometimes we need to wait and hear the voice of the Lord, to hear him speak to us, to hear the words he's saying. Sometimes it's a voice in my heart, my mind, my head. I have literally heard a voice by my left ear 2 occasions. Both occasions my life was in jeopardy. That's a story for another day. I guess the Lord had to say it out loud to get my attention. But he can speak any way he wants. We have to learn to recognize when he speaks, so stopping, slowing down, and listening. Listening. It's very important. The prophet Balaam in the Old Testament was bent on going to get paid to curse some folks. The Lord didn't want him to do that. And he told him not to a couple of times, and Balaam just kept begging, please, please, please. The Lord said finally, okay, go ahead. He didn't say, go ahead and I will let you. He said, go ahead and go. Go ahead and go with these people. And the Lord sent an angel to kill him because he was not going to let him do what he had set out to do, which was curse the nation of Israel. That he wasn't going to let him do that. And the donkey that he was riding on saw the angel with a sword drawn, ready to take him out. And the donkey swerves out of the way, so Balaam's life is spared. Balaam doesn't know it. He doesn't see the angel, and he doesn't know he's even there. He didn't slow down. Slow down and listen. Hang on a minute. Finally, the donkey speaks to him after a couple of occasions like this, when he starts beating the donkey. And then he realizes, oh, wait a minute. So sometimes, in the busyness of life, stuff going on, distractions, we live in the 21st century. You talk about distractions. There's a lot of distractions. This past week, earlier this week, I should say, I was re-watching a biography on Ulysses Grant, who was a general in the American Civil War and also became president of the United States later. In fact, he was elected twice to be president. And this biography talked about how communication was in those days. And the advent of the telegraph really pushed them forward into the future, because they could just, with a series of dots and dashes over a wire stretched across the countryside could send a message virtually instantaneously, hundreds of miles away. Quite remarkable. Quite an invention there Mr. Samuel Morse came up with, which later led to the telephone. Now today in the telephone, they're wireless. But back in the day, they were wired. Some of you listening to my voice, some of you listening to my voice will remember the telephone mounted on the wall with the squiggly wire connecting it, the cord that would allow you to stretch and move further away from the wall of where the telephone was, so you could sit down at the table or go around the corner in the hallway to get a little privacy when you were on the phone. We considered that privacy. It's laughable today, but it was required to be tethered to the wire because that's how communication took place. Where am I going with that? In this life, currently, it's so busy. There's so much going on. There's so many distractions. There's so many things. Back in the day, you could have peace and quiet. You had plenty of time to yourself and your own thoughts. And that's an art that I believe my generation is probably the last to learn, being able to just kind of be with yourself and your own thoughts and have nothing, no other outside stimulation going on, and yet be content, be in your right mind, be relaxed, be settled, and kind of recharge yourself mentally before you step back into the mainstream. Why am I saying this? We sometimes need to just slow down and listen. We looked at a time when Elijah had to stop and listen for the voice of the Lord. And then he heard it. And God wasn't shouting. He wasn't shouting over the din of the wind or the earthquake, the rumbling, the blaze of the fire, the smoke and the ash and the wind and the heat. He was whispering. And Elijah finally heard it. And then he did what the Lord told him. He went out and stood in the entrance of the cave. But he wrapped his face and covered his eyes, basically. And then the Lord asked him, "What are you doing here?" Elijah goes on to say, "Well, I'm running here, hiding out here for my life. They're going to kill me. I'm the only person left who hasn't bowed the knee to Baal." A few verses later, the Lord lets him know, no, there's 7,000 who have not bowed the knee to Baal. Now, 7,000, woo, Elijah, all right, there's 7,001 of you. Well, there were a lot of people that lived in the nation of Israel at that time and Judah, and only 7,000 had not bowed the knee. That's telling. Well, in our modern world, there's a lot of people who don't know God. They don't serve God. They don't want you to believe in God. They don't want you to serve the Lord. They want everybody to be godless because they like their evil deeds, I guess. I'm not sure exactly why. But we need to listen for the voice of the Lord and then do what he says. He's going to give you some instruction. He's going to give you some information you don't know. In this case, Elijah found out there's 7,000 that haven't yet bowed the knee. He had a job to do. The Lord gave him 3 tasks. 1, anoint Elisha to be prophet in his place. So Elijah knows, okay, well, my life's going to come to an end. My ministry's coming to an end. I'm going to anoint the next man to take my place, to take up the mantle. Literally, that's where that phrase came from. Elijah's mantle. Elisha took up Elijah's mantle after Elijah was taken up to be with the Lord. Jehu, a man in Israel, was supposed to be anointed to be king over Israel. And another man, oh sheesh, why can't I remember his name? Hazael. Now this is interesting. The Lord tells Elijah to go to Damascus. That's in the nation of Syria, the Assyrian army, the Assyrian Empire, and anoint a man named Hazael to be king. He was a general in the Assyrian army. And the Lord says, Elijah, you go and you anoint him to be king over Syria. What? They're not the people of God. I'm telling you, folks, God rules and he reigns in all the affairs of men and kings, just like the angel told Daniel in the book of Daniel. The Lord is the one who rules. He oversees. He puts up, he puts down, he replaces, he moves all the chess pieces. No matter what. You might hate your person who's leading your city, your county, your country, your state. But literally the Lord put them there for a purpose. It isn't always a noble purpose. Hazael, his purpose was to destroy and to be a conqueror and to be a ruthless conqueror. In fact, he was offended when Elijah told him, after he anointed him, Elijah starts weeping and crying. And Hazael's like, what are you crying about? He says, because I know what you're going to do to the people of Israel. And Hazael says, what are you, crazy? You think I'm a dog to do those horrible things that you just said? But he did. He did them. Years passed, and he did them, and he was ruthless. He did just what Elijah said. Well, the Lord put him in place to be a conqueror, not just for judgment on Israel, but the other nations that the Lord judged through the Assyrian army. God is God. And sometimes we need to slow down and just listen for his voice, because he's trying to tell you something and you don't always hear it. This is going on a little bit longer than I meant for it to. If you're hanging in here with me still, please, just a couple more minutes. I'll mention this. I didn't plan on it, but I think it's appropriate. Back in 2011, I was, still living in Fort Worth, Texas area. I was jobless. I had been looking for a job for a little over a year and did not find one. I couldn't find one. It was terrible. My pride was in the way in some respects. And then at the same time, though, the Lord was trying to tell me and my wife that we needed to move. But we weren't hearing him because we were distracted. And a friend of mine, one of my best friends, stopped in the airport on a layover, and he called me. And I didn't have enough time to drive to the airport and hang out with him before his next flight left, so we just talked for a few minutes. I told him what's going on. And he said, maybe the Lord's trying to tell you something. And you should ask him, Lord, are you trying to tell me something? What is that? And I thought, you know what, that's not a bad idea. So in the context and in light of what we're talking about today, sometimes needing to slow down and just listen. That evening, I prayed, Lord. Actually, right after I got off the phone, I said, Lord, what are you trying to tell me something? And I'm not getting it? Well, later that evening, I was reading my Bible and praying more earnestly. Lord, are you trying to tell me something? Make it plain. And I read a passage in the Bible, and I'm telling you, folks, I was looking down as I was reading, and all of a sudden I just looked up, and I was like, oh, we need to move. It was so plain to me. It was uncanny. I asked the Lord, I said, Lord, okay, I get it. I now understand. But you're going to need to tell my wife the same thing so that we're in agreement, because she's not going to understand when I tell her, just me. A couple of days goes by, the Lord told my wife the same thing. And we got in the car, we were on our way home from church, and she looked at me and she says, "We have to move." I said, "I know. The Lord told me that 2 days ago." And we put our house on the market at a time when you couldn't hardly give a house away. 9 days, our house was sold. We had 11 showings in 9 days and 2 offers. We just picked the one that was going to close. All were for full price. We just picked the one that wanted to close the earliest because we were getting out of Dodge, so to speak. We knew the Lord wanted us to move. Okay, we're going. We're not waiting around. Sometimes you just need to slow down and listen. He may be trying to tell you or direct your path in a way that you don't expect or that you're not thinking about. Therefore, you're not considering it. Elijah was not considering the Lord was about to whisper to him. He's looking for the wind and the shaking and the earthquake and the fire. But he heard him when he listened. God bless you. I hope this is a blessing to you today. I didn't mean to go this long. I didn't realize I would. Hope to see you this Sunday at 10:30, The True by Hilton, 10:30 Sunday morning here in Omaha. Right behind the Scooters Coffee Shop at 72nd and Haskell. We're on the first floor, main conference room on the first floor, 10:30. God bless you. Have a great rest of your day.